That to say, your basics should feel pretty natural. It shouldn't feel like you're putting a lot of effort into just tripling and then coming forward or moving backwards if you're lead. Like you shouldn't feel like you're putting so much effort into that.
Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eye so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have experience in partnered and solo dancing. Today we're doing a little bit more of a talking heads episode.
We're going to be discussing critical timing for the anchor into the one. And for simplicity's sake, we are going to be pretending it's the anchor of a 6-count pattern. So we'll probably be saying 5 and a 6 and a 1, yada, yada, yada. But obviously, that also applies for 8-count patterns or wherever an anchor may fall. So one of the things that inspired this episode was a question we got a while back. I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was someone basically explaining how they understood an anchor into one, but they were like the training wheels concepts of an anchor into a one. And so we want to address the nuance so that way if you hadn't realized you've been operating under the training wheels concepts and you're ready to move on, you will now be empowered with that knowledge. And also, this is critical timing as opposed to just plain old timing. And if you're wondering what the difference is, oh man, Austin Coyce has started a meme page on Facebook. But there is this one glorious meme about critical timing. I don't even remember what the meme was. But someone genuinely asked what the difference was in the comments, and Austin Coyce, our king, shared in the comments. This is a dramatic reading. Timing equals the foot touchy the floor at the right time. Critical timing equals how the body moving and getting the foot ready to touch the floor at the right time. And that just sent me.
I mean, it's a great explanation.
Right. Like, timing is just literally your foot touching the floor with the beat of the music, whereas critical timing is what the rest of your body is doing the rest of the time. So, broad strokes, the point of an anchor is to redirect the partnership, but particularly the follow, from going one direction and going in a different direction. It is a redirect. You might even say it's a prep. Half of our audience is going to be like, yeah, I already knew that. And the other half is going to be like,
Uh-huh.
the most basic level, the training wheels concept is that it's a triple step on the 5 and 6, followed by a single step on the 1. For leaders, it's right, 5 and 6, and then left on 1. For follows, it's left, left for 5 and 6, right on 1. But that is basic timing. The basic connection is that you're in tension for that 5 and 6. And then on count 1, you're using that tension to redirect the follow. So the follow is either in place or moving backwards for 5 and 6, and then moving forward on 1. And then the leader, conversely, is either in place or also moving backwards on 5 and 6, and then moving backwards on 1. So those are the basics. But it's much more, well, it's not necessarily much more complicated than that. It's just that there's a lot of nuance to it at the advanced levels that if you're never explicitly taught it, you might be like myself 15 years into this career. And then Alicia's like, why are you moving forward on 1? And I'm like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
Because no matter how many times I had heard the concept of boing from Miles and Tessa, which I really enjoy. If you haven't had the opportunity to take one of their boing workshops, highly recommend it. Because A, educational, B, entertaining as hell.
Yeah.
But the nuance of the timing had been lost on me. Because I thought, like, as soon as count 1 hit, bam, you're out of tension. 'Tis a lie. It's the greatest lie.
So I actually want to kind of add just briefly, one thing that you may hear, I haven't heard it as much lately, but I know when I was initially learning, I was kind of hearing the idea of like the follow is always slightly behind the beat and the lead is always slightly ahead of the beat, which is true, not true.
Yeah. It's more about the concept of initiating movement. So, like when we say a leader is ahead of the beat, that's because they're initiating movement a little early in their body, not their feet, in order for the follow to be on time. Because if you lead a follow to step forward on one, but you yourself are stepping forward on one, the follow is going to be a little bit behind because physics. So, as a leader, you need to be leading that one before the one.
The whole pre-leading thing.
Yeah, pre leading. Public service announcement. The concept of pre leading is breaking your brain. Maybe don't think about it that way. Instead, focus on critical timing in your leading role, and that will solve the pre leading problem. Were there any misconceptions, or not necessarily misconceptions, but parts of the basic that you find follows carrying forward for too long without learning the nuance?
Yeah, the main thing is when you're moving forward versus striking the foot. And this kind of ties into what I was just talking about how the follow is always slightly behind and the lead is always slightly ahead. So it's correct in the sense that, like, as a follow, we're told, you're going forward on one. And you are, but like not immediately.
Mhm.
If you think about like an anchor, basically there's kind of a point where you're moving back and then you're kind of arcing to one side and then moving forward. So as we're doing that, we have a we have to have a point where we're kind of moving backwards. We're not going to just immediately be pulled out of that because we want to smoothly finish that kind of arc. And generally, when follows are told like you're coming forward on one, and this for leads as well, like when they're told like the follow is coming forward on one, or you're moving back on one, whatever. We think that like everything, every part of us should be moving on one, like immediately on one, but it's a little bit more delayed than that a lot of the time. The concept of a delayed one, where you're not totally striking or you're not totally up over your foot on the one.
You're the whiteboard. So we are going to draw a graph to understand connection through time. And we're going to do two of them. And one is going to be like the basic understanding, uh, whereas the other one is the critical timing understanding. And we are talking about a basic, not a variation like a hitch step or anything like that. 5 and 6 and 1. So little tick marks. And yes, there's a E and a 5E and a 6 and a 1. Don't trust my drawing abilities that much. So I'm gonna keep it simple for now. And then the y-axis is going to be tension, and the higher up on the y-axis we are means the more tension, and 0 means no tension or neutral. There isn't compression in a basic anchor, but compression would be down here. So if y'all want us to do this with a push brake sometime, we'd be happy to. Let's use arbitrary numbers. Let's say max tension is 10, and that isn't to say pounds per square inch. It's just an arbitrary number so we know where maximum tension is in the context of a basic. Because depending on who you're dancing with, how fast the music is, how much weight you or your partner tends to put in the connection, it can vary. Like if you ask Roro and Brandy, they can tell you literally pounds per square inch in the hand throughout a pattern. But just because they dance at that particular weight doesn't mean they dance with at that same weight with other dancers, or yours might be different. So the 10, arbitrary number right now. It just means we have tension in the hand. where the two partners are moving away from each other, and a bug would likely not survive in between those fingers. Let's orient ourselves around count 6, because count 6 is where people tend to understand at a basic level where maximum tension is. And the idea is that you're kind of growing into that through your 5 and 6. And then I think the understanding is that somewhere around count 1, you're starting to achieve neutral because you've already led the follow forward. Is that kind of how you understand the basic understanding?
That's a lot of what I've heard.
Yeah. Okay. All right. My curve is sad, but hopefully the idea comes across visually. Over here, you can see we have a straight line, straight line. It's not like easing in, easing out kind of a situation. If it's particularly, if you look right here, we're not spending as much time at 10 because we're getting there fast and we're leaving there fast. Which as over here, you can see how zoomed in, it looks more like that. So we're actually spending more time at that max tension, for example.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'm going to get rid of all these extra things so it's not cluttered. The other thing to notice is that we're actually at max tension right before count 1 and after 6. So you're actually continuing to increase the tension up to and through count 6, and it doesn't release until right before count 1. And because we're not doing any specific pattern, we can't be specific about this part of the pattern because what kind of connection you're transitioning to for the rest of the pattern determines what that arc would be. But the point is that these are arcs, not straight lines, is the other thing to keep in mind. So that is the more accurate timing of the connection from an anchor into a 1. Now we're going to talk about how you actually create that. One of the things in that question we received a while back was that this person understood that the way you lead a 1 is by taking a large step back. And they even emphasized large step back in all caps, like they meant it. And we were like, oh no, that's a training wheels concept. So the first thing to understand about a 1 as a leader is it's not your left foot leading the follow forward. It's your right foot. All right. Doozy 1 down. Doozy number 2, and this is something we've been talking a lot about recently, is you don't necessarily need to apply force to bring a follow forward on 1. So what that means is the way you are rolling through your right foot and shifting your weight over your right foot and following through with that motion so your weight is actually moving back past the heel of your right foot, that is what is leading the follow forward. And at the basic level, you should not have to drive through the floor and like put a lot of force into like trying to push the floorboards away in front of you in order to lead a follow forward. You really only need to do a basic roll through your foot, shifting your weight, and that will bring a follow forward. And that's your basic. You want that to be your basic because if you apply force every single time, all of your 1s are going to be at this high volume with a lot of power. And then if you want to create contrast in your dancing and to add power, you have to do even more power than that. And it becomes a very different roller coaster. One that even roller coaster fans might be like, do I want to go on that one?
You're just in constant acceleration as a follow.
Yeah. Just, and it's exhausting. It's hard to sustain for hours and hours for a late night dance.
So I was going to say, because you're talking about how not driving through the floor should be the basic. That doesn't mean that if you're dancing with somebody that you actually do need to drive through the floor more to lead them, depending on what their connection is like at that period of time. That doesn't mean you can't use that as like a baseline for that dance. Just like if you're practicing on your own, if you're practicing with like, your partner, whatever, it should be that you're using the floor, but not really driving through it. So I just wanted to make sure to clarify you can use that if you do have like a heavier follow. But
yeah, it should be something that you're able to turn on and off and should not be a part of your every single basic you ever dance because it's not necessary and it's exhausting. So, and then the order of operations for that rolling of the foot. So, the edge of your right toe strikes the floor first, and that's what's happening on time. So, that's happening on count 6. The edge of your right toes touches the floor. You roll through the foot, your heel will hit the floor before your knee straightens. So, your heel hits the floor, and then you straighten the leg, and that's what's creating the hip action. This is something we talked about in a recent like 2-parter Talking Heads episode. If you straighten the leg before your heel touches the floor, you're going to be falling and not having control. And if you do, I don't know, I see this all the time, both in leaders and follows, where the heel hits the floor at the exact time the leg straightens.
yeah.
And y'all are working way too hard.
Yeah. So the problem with that is that, sorry.
Please
you
do.
want to finish your
I
thought?
would just rant forever. You'll probably be working.
I was just going to say, so the problem with that is that you're basically locking out your knee and then stepping on it, which is damaging, and it does not create a nice flow to the movement. And that's what we're looking for as West Coast swing dancers, right? Is there's a very smooth look to it. So if you are straightening the leg totally before the foot is on the floor, then it's going to create kind of a clunky feeling as you move kind of up and over it. So I just wanted to mention that, like, the problem is that you lock out your knee basically and you step on it, which is damaging. So don't do that.
Yeah, it's damaging and it prevents you from having any sort of hip sway or hip swing whatsoever. I don't know. I need to draw another thing to the whiteboard.
I should also clarify while you're doing that there are times that you won't have to put the whole foot on the floor just because of whatever you may be doing. But if that's the case, you still would not have a straightened leg. I just wanted to mention that, like, you don't always have to have the foot completely flat on the floor. You just need to have a softer knee if you are going to not complete it.
Yes, I know these look like frogs.
What are we drawing?
Just go. All right.
Not paying attention to what you're doing, so I was talking.
You're like, what is
What
happening?
is this?
Okay. So in order to have any sort of hip swing in any dance, and this also qualifies for like Cuban motion in Latin dances, your hips need to literally be closer to the floor than they are when you're standing with both legs straight. So if you're constantly landing with perfectly straight legs, there's no way for either of your hips to change height. Whereas if you start, and this is exaggerated, just so it's really easy to see because I can't draw. If you start
position
with your hips physically closer to the ground and then you straighten one leg, like over here, that's how you can get a difference in height between one hip and the other. So one of the things that I have been doing in group classes that I've been leading, and it's been really successful, is you start just standing naturally with good posture, both feet hip width apart, and your legs comfortably straight, not locked out. And then what you do is you do the tiniest plie into both knees, dropping your belly button anywhere from like a centimeter to a half an inch closer to the floor. And you think of leaving your belly button at that height relative to the floor. And then when you go to like march your legs, you notice your hips alternate in height because when you straighten a leg, it can actually lift a hip higher than the other. And that's been really successful. But so, like, if you're struggling to have hip swing, it might be because you're this guy over here and your hips are just too high off the ground in order to create hip swing. Your hips need to be a little bit closer to the ground than they would be with you standing naturally on both feet before you can
Mm-hmm.
have any sort of hip swing.
Yeah, I also want to add, so when you do have straight legs, you can technically have some hip movement if you're swaying back and forth or forward and backwards. However, that doesn't create a dynamic swing. It has to have the up and down aspect as it's moving side to side as well.
Mhm.
The just side to side, you can consider it like, swinging the hips, I guess, because you are, kind of going one side to the other. But that's more just like weight transfer. There's not an actual like tip of the hips as you're moving back and forth.
Mhm. So back to the leader. So we have that toe strike, the edge of the toes, and when I say edge of the toes, I mean like this, not like getting the under part of your toes and then the rest of your foot. You want the tip of your toes. So that happens on 6. You roll through, your heel hits the ground first, and then you straighten your leg. And that's when you're actually like using the floor to like straighten your leg up off the floor. And that helps put your weight into that right hip to settle, which is like the buzzword a lot of people talk about. And you follow through with that motion. So you're continuing to move. You're not just getting up over that foot, but you're letting your momentum carry you back past the heel of your right foot. It can feel like you're falling, but when there isn't much momentum, it's really controlled. And you just let your left foot catch you underneath you. So you are not standing balanced over your right leg, extending your left leg behind you, touching the floor with your left leg, and then pushing yourself over it. Instead, you're just letting yourself naturally roll backwards off of your right foot, and you're letting your left foot catch you on count 1. Similarly, like your left foot is striking the ground on count 1, but you're not it isn't that left foot that's doing any of the leading. The left foot is a result of having led. All right. Follow's turn.
It is a similar idea for the follow where you want to be hanging back and your foot will strike on time, but that doesn't mean that you are already up over that foot when you strike.
And
You
you're
should
referring to count,
be,
correct?
yes, as a follow, the 5 and 6, you should be basically moving backwards. And then you will, if you're being led correctly, you will kind of feel like a release almost right on that one that you're going to step on. But that does not mean that you are like right on top of it. It's kind of like it's like the rubber band idea, right? Where you're kind of like prepping it, there's a bunch of tension, and then you release it, and then it kind of goes forward. Same idea where like as it's released, then you go forward, and not like you're pressing out of the left foot on the like 6 and 1 to be forward on your foot on the 1. You need to be hanging back. And this is kind of where we talk about pitch, is that, you need to be kind of more pitched backwards. So weight not over midfoot. It needs to be over the heel more, or at least slightly back towards the heel more, so that you aren't just stepping all weight directly over the foot on count one when you strike. It needs to be strike and then you move over it. So when I was saying that, like, I heard, when I was starting that, the follower's always behind the beat. Yeah, kind of, in the sense that, like, your foot will strike on the beat, but then the body will follow, right? So it's not, you're not going to be ahead. You're not going to be stepping directly on the one weight, all on that one.
Fun way of thinking about it is thinking of like old school cartoons. Because like, let's say a character needs to be yeeted off stage, right? The hook comes in from off screen, goes around it. But instead of the character moving as one piece, all of the sudden it is suddenly like a noodle and it like noodles off screen, right? So like there is a part of that character that is on screen for a long time before it actually starts moving. So that's the extreme version. But that's kind of like the idea that we want. Just because the follow's hand is now moving away from them forward through space doesn't mean that the whole body is moving as one concrete unit attached to that hand. This is the boing that Miles and Tessa were trying to talk about, that kind of like in animation, it's called overlapping action, where based on the physics and the point of initiation determines the follow through of the rest of the body. And what determines the follow through of the rest of the body in dance and in West Coast swing is your technique. And to have correct follow through of the body, pitch is one of the things that we apply for follows. If you're pitched forward, what is likely to happen is you're going to be tipped forward in order to come forward. And because you're a person with free will, you're going to like resist that. So you'll oddly have this whole like one piece situation. You're just going to be like teetering. Or if
You
you
just feel like
struggle,
you're falling.
yeah, you just feel like you're falling. Or if you've noticed that as a problem, or your instructors have noticed that as a problem, instead of shifting your pitch, they might be telling you to be lighter, for example. So you're less connected, but then you're able to move forward more upright because you're under your power. You're not your own power. You're not letting the partnership dictate how you're moving. But if technique wise, you're setting your body up correctly, it should be a passive thing to come forward correctly as a follow. It should not take cognitive or extra muscular effort to follow through correctly.
Like, as a follow, if you are doing your technique correctly, you will basically be able to hang out pitched back in the position that you are getting into on that 6 and if you are not led forward, if you don't get to that final amount of stretch to like release, then you'll just hang out there. Like, it's not necessarily a conscious decision of like, oh, I'm not gonna come forward. It's more you're just kind of there because in terms of physics, that's where you're gonna be unless you are moved. So
Yep. Yep. So now let's talk about arcs. Let's talk about arcs in respect to the follow first, because the follow has a more standard basic arc than a leader. A leader can kind of do whatever they want. So we'll start with follows. So we're gonna have a bird's eye view of a slot, and then we're gonna have the audience view of a slot. And let's say we have the leader over here, follower over here, and let's say bird's eye view, so it's leaders left over here, followers right over here. So a follower is actually going to do a bit of a back to the side and then forward. It feels like a U-turn from a bird's eye view. And the leader has options depending on how they're countering that. So a leader could literally do the same thing. This is actually something that we see Kyle Red do a lot, when he actually finishes with his right foot in front when he's leading. A leader can actually stay in place if they want and lead the follow through that anchor. Um, or a leader can do an away, side, and then back. And I would say that is the one that I would recommend making your basic. So you're practicing increasing the tension, which is this part, moving a little bit to the side so the follow gets their side movement because you're doing it. You're not having to think about leading it independently of what your body is doing. And then you're shifting your weight backwards to actually lead the one, which is this part.
The side to side from the follow, it's because of shifting weight from the right to the left.
Ooh, good point.
Because you said that the lead shifting the weight is what shifts the follow, and that's partially true, but just in an anchor, as far as like if you're just doing a triple step as a follow, you're going obviously left to right, left, right, and then so you're going to be on this slot over here, and then you're going to be, so you're coming back on the right side and you're going forward on the left side. So there's a slight difference, and it can be a little bit more dramatic if the lead kind of adds more to that. But just basic, like not anything added to it. The side to side aspect of that kind of U-turn, it's just because you're shifting your weight from the right side to the left side.
Excellent. And similarly for a leader doing this version, that is transitioning from your left to your right.
And actually, I want to also
Yes.
mention, so that third foot position that we talk about, that's what kind of creates it, is because you're putting your right foot is more or less straight in front of you, and the weight is on there. And then your left as a follow is slightly more out. And so that's why it's kind of getting that side to side, is because your feet aren't like in line with each other that way. It's more that your weight is over here, then your other foot is slightly more out. So when you put your weight onto this foot, then it's moving.
Which brings up a small tangent because one of the things that I find myself correcting on students all the time is they're not laterally, like left or right, getting far enough to actually get over that foot. So here, let's make it. So this is a front view. So these are feet, these are legs, and these are the hips. So this is an example of someone being split weight. This is an example of someone being over 1 foot. This other foot can be doing whatever they want, right? But what I see a lot is someone kind of splitting the difference between these two things and saying they're on 1 foot versus the other. And this foot is more like here. And then this foot is needed for like stability. You want to be laterally, so left or right, far enough over a foot. So this way to be over this foot. So that way this foot can do whatever it wants. And if your other foot can't do whatever it wants, you're not enough over your standing foot. And that could also include front or back. But I feel like more people struggle with the side to side part than the front to back part. So when we are, as a follow, switching from our right to our left, or as a leader, switching from our right or our left to our right, we need to make sure that we are laterally getting over that foot or we're bringing that foot underneath us enough to be over it. But for a basic, we want to also be shifting our weight to the side to get over that foot. And that's what allows for this part of that U-turn to happen, because your center is actually moving through space laterally somewhat. And then the bigger the step, the more you'll move laterally. We see that a lot. But even in your basic, where your foot strike isn't very far away from your previous foot, you still need to be shifting your weight laterally to get over that foot.
A more simple way to think about it is that when we're doing the striking rolling action, and we're wanting to be also changing the weight from one side to the other, you're effectively balancing on one foot and then you're balancing on the other foot. Even though you have that other foot down doing something, effectively you are going from balancing on one foot to balancing on another foot.
So simple. I love it. All right, now let's talk about the arc from the audience perspective. One of the things that I used to hear all the time that confused the heck out of me is that it's like you're moving backwards from a low center and then you're moving forwards from a high center. And all that ever did was make me fall over, personally, because it made me like come up and over and then pitch forward as I was coming forward through my one. And then I'd be falling and tripping over myself. What has been helping me a lot has actually been thinking about it in the opposite. So I'll be pitching backwards as I move forward. And then because I'm pitched backward, as I settled my weight and ground into my six and so on and so forth, then it feels like my lower body is coming forward first. And this is the part where you tell me if I'm off my rocker or I'm correct. Maybe
That
I'll
was
know.
correct.
What?
No, that was correct.
Oh, wait. And then as a leader, because you're moving backwards with a backward pitch, but then you're leading with a backward pitch.
Yeah.
And so there's this one moment where you may send some of your weight down into the ground if you did want to drive through the floor, so you have more weight and more strength to push against the floorboards. But for the most part, you're just kind of like, do, 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 do. I'm moving backwards with the pitch back as your basic. You could, if you wanted to do, like, if you're doing this version as a leader from the bird's eye view, where you're actually doing the same U-turn as the follow, so you're going forward and then to the right and then back, you might also want to match this, where you're letting the handhold be a little bit high as you're going forward. But then as you're moving to the side with the follow, you might ground down and let the handhold come down like a centimeter to an inch and then push backwards. And that would be matching the follows arcs, both in this view and this view. And then follows will fall in love with you and they will line up to dance with you, and you will have no sanity and you will need to be escorted off the floor. I speak from experience.
Yeah.
And then you do the thing that I do where you like stop leading socially for long enough, people forget that you do that at all, which is kind of nice, not gonna lie, because I prefer following. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, so we have talked about critical timing, not only for what your body is doing, but what the connection is doing. And we have talked about the arcs. So this is what a basic anchor into a one is. But if you're still working under the like training wheels version of the timing and the movement, you're gonna struggle to advance, no matter how many patterns you learn, no matter how many fancy stylings you learn. If you haven't adjusted the timing of your movement and your connection, you're still going to be struggling to advance competitively if that is something that you're focusing on.
And I also want to just briefly, because I don't know that I like broke down exactly timing versus when you're supposed to be over what area of the foot or in what
Yeah,
part of the arc for
we'll bring
follows. So 5 and should be weight moving backwards. And then, so 5 and 6, it should stay on the same side as you strike for the 6 with the left foot. And then as you come around, it should be the 6 and that you're switching from the right foot to the left foot weighted. And then you're going to be that 6 and 1. So the 6 and you're going to be still moving side and somewhat back. And then as you hit that kind of max tension is when you're going to release to come forward.
Okay.
So that's going to be like actually on the 1, but not before.
So let's do that bird's eye view arc and apply timing to it. So the 5 and the and are over here. And the 6 is when you're starting to transition to the left, or are you still over to your right side?
Should still be over to the right side.
Okay. And the 6, so you're going this way.
And then 6 and is when you should be transitioning from right to left.
All right.
And as you are doing that, because you should have a little bit of slack still left in the arm to move away before you hit max tension, you will also be moving back as you're moving side to side.
It's a little bit more like this. Okay, gotcha. And then 1 is over here. All right. Cool. I learned a thing. Yeah, because I think personally, my 6 has been more over there.
Mm.
So I will be practicing.
Yeah, the foot will strike over there, but the weight will still be on the right side for 6.
I will include that in the edit. Ah, that was cool. And then basically for a leader who's doing the like the zigzag kind of one, it's very similar timing wise.
And also, like, if you want to think about like an arc for the leads, because you should be moving back before your follow on that one, it's going to be before. It's like basically on that, like when you are kind of letting your follow slow that movement, like bring you up over your foot, and then when you're transitioning, that's kind of that arc for leads. That's another way to look at it.
And then another important point to keep in mind is that you need to have enough rope in your arm, your connected arm, to be able to have that backwards away from your partner moment. Like there are circumstances at the advanced levels where as a follow you could have a more static frame and the leader is like micro leading you through those arcs. But you don't want that to be your basic as a follow. And as a leader, if you were doing the thing where you're doing the same thing as a follow in your own body to get that arc, you do want a little bit more of a static frame yourself. So it's your body doing the leading. And then if you're a leader who's not moving through space through your 5 and 6, you still need to let the follow move through space. And you will be disconnecting your frame from your body just a little bit and using an arcing shape through your left arm, for example, in order to give the follow the space to arc through their anchor. If you have a practice partner, a really helpful and also hilarious before and after you can do is purposefully do an anchor that does not have that lateral arc to it, and think of it literally just straight back, like you're on the plank, you're walking the plank, and feel how much more difficult that is than letting that lateral shift happen from the leader's left to their right and the follow's right to their left. and that feels so much more natural. It's basically taking advantage of the same physics forces that make a grapevine easier to do than stepping in front then side, front then side, front then side, front then side. Because when you do that, you're having to stop yourself, use muscle to redirect yourself. Whereas if you do front side, back side, that's what the energy wants to do, and it requires less force to maintain. And so arcing your anchor like that requires less force to maintain. Basically, the champs are really lazy and they have figured out how to use as little energy as possible to do their basics. And that's in part why shenanigans happen
Yeah.
because they have energy.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't killing myself for the first 30 seconds of this dance, so we can do gymnastics now.
That to say, your basics should feel pretty natural. It shouldn't feel like you're putting a lot of effort into just tripling and then coming forward
Mhm.
or moving backwards if you're lead. Like you shouldn't feel like you're putting so much effort into that. And I know that a lot of the training wheels that we use initially when we teach things can make it feel that way as we kind of get into more advanced concepts, but we don't leave the training wheels behind.
Yeah.
So,
For
because then we're just
example,
complicating and adding things on instead of uh, morphing it into something different.
yeah, yeah. Because it's kind of like when you're first literally training wheels on a bicycle, when you're first transitioning to not having them, you need to be moving fast enough to not need them, for example. And the training wheels concept of a big step back on one for leaders comes from the fact that most beginner leaders in West Coast swing don't know how to move their body through space on purpose and on time. And the taking a big step back with your left foot on one is one of the ways we do that. It's a large step because it makes their body move through space backwards. If they took a small step, they could sneakily do that without actually moving their body backwards at all, for example. So that's why it's a training wheel. It's helping achieve a lead in a way that's accessible to newer dancers. But ultimately, that is not how we lead. The point is to move your body back through space. And when you're connected well to your partner, you only have to move your body back through space like an inch or so, and the follow will go. And that
Yeah.
math gets more extreme the taller the leader is and the smaller the follow is. Like I
Mhm.
blink at a small follow and they fly through space.
Yeah.
For example. Or conversely, itty bitty leader, giant follow, you might have to move through space more for a follow to move forward. Because if you think about me, I have size 10.5 feet. I literally have more forward and back distance I need to go before I roll off of a foot. Wow. I've never put it into exactly those words before, but I'm like, yeah, no, that's what's happening. So I do need, as a tall follow, I do need a leader to take a larger step on one. Not because I need the distance between their feet to be huge, but because I need their upper body to physically move through space more to bring me off of my left foot for me to need to take a step forward.
And another just like analogy for the training wheels concept. It's like you start with training wheels and you leave them on while you're trying to take your bike on a trail somewhere and kind of do some like turns and whatever, and the training wheels are still on there, so you can't really do that. So instead of taking them off, you just kind of take some like pliers or something and adjust them so that they're not quite even or something to that effect, that you can get a little bit of what you're looking for, but it's not quite right.
And this is why one of the things I harped on our last Talking Heads episode was that it's really important for teachers to identify training wheels concepts and label them as such. So that way dancers will know, oh, this is something I will have to dismantle later in order to do more advanced things. This is not something that is a permanent part of my bicycle.
When specific instructors are working like one-on-one with you, a lot of times they'll kind of give various different ways of thinking about adjusting something or of like actually like physically where are you putting this thing. They'll give you kind of slightly different variations of that to see what works for you, but you can't then go tell somebody else the exact same thing because they might have a different problem, and taking what worked adjustment wise for you to somebody else might create more problems for them rather than solve the problem that it was trying to solve for you.
Yep. Oh, that's such an important one. And then another thing that I really enjoy doing as an instructor is once I've identified like the umbrella under which I notice a problem is happening and somebody's dancing, instead of immediately going to teaching, I first ask them what their understanding of that part of the dance is supposed to be, technique wise, timing wise, movement wise, because that will then tell me if they're still operating under training wheels understanding or more advanced understanding. And if they're operating under training wheels, I can then be explicit and be like, okay, that is a training wheels understanding. So we need to either like set that aside or modify it. And you get really explicit that way. A lot of confusion happens in West Coast swing dance teaching, but also like teaching and education in general, where there's this assumption either way of what the foundation is for your student. If you think they have a more advanced cognitive understanding of what's supposed to be happening than they actually do, your instruction is probably going to confuse them.
Yeah, because you can, when you do get, training those concepts, you can do other things correctly without like knowing specifically that you're doing something correct. It's more just you just so happen to be
Yeah.
doing this correct without knowing there's a reason for this specific thing that's happening.
Yep. And that's where like people who have a lot of talent can
Yeah.
struggle. So that's what happened to me. I had a lot of talent and I was a good student, but I needed much more higher level instruction in order to really understand what I was supposed to be doing. Instead, I had like training wheel, training wheel, training wheel, training wheel piled up with some advanced things. I was real confused. And that's why my following was like a clusterfuck. And my leading was fine because I never trained in my leading. I just understood it. And I was finally in All Star Strictly's before people could even dance the opposite role from their gender in Jack and Jill. And it's just like, this makes no sense. There was no reason why my following shouldn't have been at the same high level. And it's because there was issues with how I was being educated on the followers role.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know, like, for you, like, as we have, talked through things, like, the understanding is there, but the, like, actual how to put that into play was not quite correct based on a variety of corrections that you had had.
Man, I was like poked and prodded, plucked chicken. It was just not good. No, I was more like the trifle that Rachel did in Friends.
I like how I knew where you were going with that as soon as you said trifle.
Yeah. And unlike Joey, who was like, such and such, good. Such and such, good. It was like one part of the trifle was sweet and the other part had like ground beef in it. Whatever. Like Joey didn't care. He's a goat. But judges care. They're like, there should not be ground beef in a meat trifle. Wait, no. There should not be ground
It
beef
should be
in a
ground
sweet
beef.
trifle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Guys, I
I
think that's
think
probably our rant for today.
so hopefully that was helpful for everybody. If you enjoy this kind of breakdown, we're more than happy to do that for other parts of basic patterns. Just let us know in the comments like what you want us to break down, and we'll be happy to do that. Um,
Yep. Or if there's any videos you want us to look over.
Yeah. Yeah. One of our upcoming videos is going to be breaking down how champions adjust to lower level dancers in a pro-am context. Really excited about that video. So if there are any things that you've noticed that more advanced dancers do with you, for example, that you're like, I always have this problem with everybody else, but when I'm with a champion, I don't have a problem. Describe it in the comments and maybe we'll address it.
Yeah.
Pros do the kind of adjustments that you're not even aware of, and they fix your technique. It's really cool.
Honestly, sometimes I don't think they're aware of it either. It's just
Well, yeah, because they've been doing it so long.
they're adjusting.
And
Yep.
there's something feeling. A really cool thing I did in a private lesson the other day was explain some of my Jedi mind tricks with how I can adjust to something through feel. And we were basically working on underarm turns, and I was teaching the leader how to feel around count 2, how large the follow's frame was and how big the turn over their head needs to be. And because basically, when a follow steps forward on count 2, there is going to be a slight right to left shift.
Yep.
They're not dancing on a balance beam. And if you have a handhold uh where both people like are engaged with their frame, so their frame is going with their body, you'll be able to feel as a leader a little bit of lateral compression into your fingertips, bringing your handhold to your right. And an itty bitty follow will bring your handhold like a little bit, and a larger follow with a bigger frame will bring the handhold further through space to the right. You'll be able to feel that on count 2. So with your eyes closed, you'll have a better idea of how large or how far across the slot you need to take your left hand in order for the follow to go under your arm instead of their own. It was real fun. I hadn't done that with students before. And I'm like, it's not magic. It's just physics.
Yeah.
Mm. Without any further ado, until next time.
We'll see you all later.